This is actually one of my favorite episodes because I get to tell one of my favorite stories. I am, and always have been, a huge Beatle fan. Now, Abbey Road, of course, is the name of one of their most famous albums. It's also the name of the studio in London where they recorded most of their world-changing music. Yes, when you're in London, you can take a Beatle tour, and you can go up and you can see the outside of Abbey Road, but you cannot get through those imposing doors to the inner sanctum. Would you like to know what's inside? Because I've been there. Okay, let's drop the needle. EMI Records is a large, kind of uninspiring building. It was originally built as a 9-bedroom house. In 1928, it became the world's first purpose-built recording studio. Inside are 3 recording studios and more history than you can imagine. On one of my first trips to London, like any other Beatle fan, I knew I had to go to Abbey Road. Well, it's a short tube ride from central London to St. John Woods. Then you get out and you walk about 6 minutes to Abbey Road. A short detour will take you down to Cavendish Avenue, where you can go by the house that Paul McCartney frequently lives in when he's in London, still to this day. Then you're at the crosswalk. And you walk across that fabled crosswalk and you're in front of Abbey Road Studios. But that's it. You can't get in. A few years later, I was back in London, but this time I was the president of the DVD Association. And one of our members was Abbey Road Studios, who had a huge DVD creation department. So that day, I took the tube up to St. John Woods. I walked over and across the crosswalk, and just wishing that there was a photographer to take my picture, because there I was. And I walked right up to the steps, right inside the studio, and told the receptionist that I had a business meeting with my colleague from the studios. She checked and said, "Have a seat." So I sat there in the lobby, and it was underwhelming and overwhelming at the same time. Underwhelming because I looked around and there was no Beatles memorabilia or pictures or anything anywhere. But as I sat there, I was reminded that they had walked through those doors many, many times over the years. Finally, my host arrived and took me inside the hallowed doors. We walked down a hallway and he pointed out, here's Studio 1. This is Studio 2, where the Beatles did record. This is Studio 3, but all the doors were closed and you couldn't really see anything. Then we walked to a winding staircase that took us up to a turret, which is where the DVD studios were located. After our meeting, he asked if I'd like a tour of Abbey Road. Of course. So we started out. First, he took me to the kitchen in the Commissary. Now this is where, and I've seen lots of pictures of this, where the Beatles would stop and have tea and biscuits or whatever while they were recording. This was their break room. Right behind that is an outdoor garden. And we walked out to the garden, and lots of trees and birds singing and everything. And he told me that this is the garden where Paul actually heard the blackbird singing, which inspired him to record that song. Then came the studios. Now, nothing overly spectacular here. I mean, they're big recording spaces. We went into Studio 1. We went into Studio 3, which is much smaller. But then we went into Studio 2. This is the studio that the Beatles recorded most of their songs in. And the minute I walked into the room, I could remember seeing pictures of them in there. Now, the day I was there, I took some pictures. Here's some of them. The day I was there, it was set up with a bunch of chairs. They were doing some sort of a symphony recording or something. In the next picture, you can see a staircase going up to the control room. This is the room where George Martin would be. The Beatles would be down on the studio floor. The control room looks the same, except all the equipment has changed. Where it was all analog equipment, it's all now digital. But we weren't done yet. And my host, with a twinkle in his eye, said, "I'd like to show you something I think you're really going to enjoy." Then we walked down some stairs into the basement of Abbey Road Studios and down a long hallway. At the end of the hallway, there were banks of lights shining on what looked like a bank vault door. And there were lots of security cameras around. And my friend said, "Don't touch the door, it's alarmed." This was it. This is the vault of all of the Beatles recordings, master tapes, outtakes, everything that they've done, right on the other side of that door. Now, he told me there are only two people who have the combination and the keys to open up that door. Giles Martin, the son of their producer, George Martin, and Paul McCartney. And it takes the consent of both people in order to open that door. Unfortunately, I couldn't take any pictures. That wasn't allowed. And naturally, they didn't open the door for me. But still, it was amazing to know, right behind that door was everything that the Beatles had ever done. As we were leaving, he asked if I'd like my picture taken on the crosswalk. And of course, that would be grand. Years before, when I was in Los Angeles as a disc jockey and they put up the billboard on Sunset Strip, here's me climbing up on the billboard, check out those striped pants, acting like I was crossing Abbey Road. That's as close as I thought I'd ever get to it. But no, here I am again, this time actually walking across the crosswalk, getting my picture taken. Now let's discuss that famous picture of the Beatles. Much was made at the time that this photo proved that Paul was dead. Supposedly, the picture shows John dressed in white as the funeral minister, Ringo wearing a suit as a pallbearer, Paul walking barefoot and out of step, showing that he is dead, and George dressed as a gravedigger. Behind them, there's a Volkswagen, and the license plate reads 28IF, which was interpreted to represent that Paul would be 28 if he were still alive. Now, this is all bunk, of course. The Beatles were wearing what they wore that day to the studio, and in fact, they couldn't be bothered to do a formal photo shoot. So Paul quickly sketched out an idea of them walking across the crosswalk, and the whole thing was done in 10 minutes. And if you look at this picture, where you can see Paul is adjusting Ringo's collar, you can actually see he's wearing his sandals. And for the limited compact disc release, this photo was used. Not only are the Beatles crossing the walk in the opposite direction, but again you can see Paul is wearing sandals. And that VW in the background? Well, the fact is, they tried to get it towed. And Paul was only 27 at that time. So that was my magical mystery tour inside Abbey Road Studios. Now, the very next day, I did take a Beatles tour. And we ended up at St. John's Wood. We crossed a crosswalk. We stopped out in front of the studios. And the guide of the tour says, "I'm sorry, no one is allowed in. It is a working studio. So take your pictures, but we're going to have to leave." And I couldn't resist myself. I said, "That's okay. I was inside yesterday." And actually, a number of people on the tour wanted my autograph and took my pictures. If you want more information on Abbey Road Studios, and if you want to see the live webcam of the crosswalk, check out this website. One last Paul McCartney story. I've got to see him many times over the years, but last year on July 13th, 2019, my wife and I saw him at Dodger Stadium. He played a 3-hour set with 38 songs, starting with A Hard Day's Night and ending with Hey Jude just before the encore. That encore included a surprise appearance of Ringo Starr, who drummed on Sgt. Pepper and Helter Skelter. It was a blast, and Paul, at 78 years old, he still rocks. If you liked this episode, hit the like button, and you can also leave me a comment down below, and I'll respond to you. If you subscribe, we'll let you know when future episodes come out. In the meantime, keep a rockin'. Please check out my companion YouTube channel, The World Is My Location, and How to Think Like a Cinematographer. Most of the albums that I talk about can be found at your local vinyl store or on eBay. Individual songs most likely are on Spotify, Apple Music, or Amazon Music, or even some on YouTube.